this is essentially how these things are put together. So if you take a look at on the monitor, you'll put glue on the back of one of the pages, and then you'll glue it together. Then you'll take the glue, put it between the pieces, and start gluing them together until they get completely folded out this way. All right, until you've created the book. Now, we've got 10 pages, right? So we're going to work out 10 cards. So we're going to work out 5. This will give us 5 pages on the bottom side. It will give us 5 pages on the top side. So to glue these, there's a couple of things that you can do. A couple ways to glue this. First of all, as I'm doing this, I'm just going to look to see which one of my pages has blemishes on it, like there's a little bit of ink right here. So this is going to be my back side. So I am going to be working with a tray of glue this morning, just so I can dip it in to that glue bottle, just dip it into the glue. And then I'm going to just spread a line of glue out along the middle here, and then along the other edge. Now, this is going to be that first page that I was talking about. I'm going to take another card right here, and I'm going to push those together. So I'll line up the edge of the card with that folded edge, folded middle part right there. Just get them lined up. Be as exact as you can, and press down on that. Use your bone folder to press along the edges to make sure that that glue gets stuck to your book. And then it's just a process. I'm going to take what would be page number 2 in my diagram. I'm going to paint or spread glue along the edge, the outer edge, and the folded edge. A little bit of glue on my newsprint. I'll set that up there for a moment. And then I am going to glue that down to that back side. I'm going to use my bone folder and press those edges down. So what you're looking to create here is a folded book that has extra rigidity in it so that it can stand up. So if you're using lighter weight paper, last week we used that really thick paper, and it was able to stand up on its own. Most of the paper we have that we would put in books, though, won't stand up on its own unless it's doubled up, like what we're doing here. And so this gives it an extra bit of support while it's standing up. And then it's just a repetitive process. Spread the glue out.
You just like, it is in a similar shape.
All right, so I'm going to switch my gluing technique just a little bit here. I'm getting rid of the silicone brush, and I'm pulling in a foam brush right now. So I can dip that in on the edges, just get a thin line of glue. It takes a little bit of this, the foam works as a sponge, and it soaks up a lot of ink a lot of glue to begin with. So it may take just a little bit more glue those first couple times. This gives it, because I used that foam brush and I went through the inside, then that meant that the entire page was glued together, not just the edges, leaving the middle part open. Now the drawback to gluing the way that I'm gluing these books together is that it puts a lot of glue on the page. So it's this really great, it does a really great hold for the paper, but because there's so much glue, there's a lot of moisture in the glue, and so then it can cause the pages to warp a little bit. So after you're done gluing a book like this, it's always a good idea just to put it under a little bit of pressure, lay a couple books down on top of it, and let it sit for a little bit, an hour or so, and then you can come back to it after that. So I will put this video back up, and one of the things that you'll notice that I'm doing here is I'm gluing on the on one surface, and then I am putting a piece of paper underneath my book so that it so that I don't stick my pages into glue that was overbrushed on my during the binding process. So I forgot to put paper underneath, and there was glue on my bookboard, and it got stuck to my card. I got lucky this time because it's on the single flap here, which gets the last one glued onto it, so I can hide it. But just as a reminder, not to get too distracted while you're doing this, so that you can remember to do these important things that could potentially wreck or ruin your binding for that particular book if you're not careful. Back underneath, there we go. With this one, this is where we're going to get our first sort of like dip our toes into the world of binding. So I'm going to put something in, I'm going to put a set of pages in here. I'm going to sew in a text block into this book. And so what you all have, I've handed out to all of you, is 4 sheets of paper. The reason I gave you 4 sheets is because this is the traditional amount of pages that go into something called a signature. And a signature is just a portion of the entire text block that's glued together. You have these 4 pages. It's a magic number because when you fold these pages over to create your signature and you give them a good crease, there's very little change in here. They're fairly even on the edges. So you can imagine, so I've got these 4 pages that look like this. There's the middle one. And then here is the second one. And even though they're the same size pages measured, the middle one is just a little bit higher than the second folded one. Does it make sense? Yeah. You know, they're nested inside of each other. So as you continue to go down with these, they get just a little bit further down on that from each other. When you're using thin paper like this, it's nearly imperceptible. You can see it if you look really close. You can see, oh, maybe I should have, used a bone folder, and I could have got a little closer to the edges. But really, this is pretty good. If you were using any thicker paper, though, you might only be able to do 2 pages at a time before you start to see that sort of wedging at the top of it. So when I'm holding them together like this, I'm looking down, they should be even. If I was using really, really thick paper, I might only be able to do 1 sheet at a time on this. So it just depends. This is a fairly good page weight, the kind of paper that you would find in a hardback book. It's copy weight paper, a little heavier. It's a nice texture to it. It's cotton based. So it's just it's a touch thicker than the other pages. But this is called a signature. And the signatures usually have 4 pages. Sometimes the weight of the paper, the thickness of the paper may necessitate that you only do 3 or maybe even 2 pages in your signatures. All right, so you've got those all folded. The next thing to do is to bring your ruler into your book like this, match it at the top if you've got a nice machinist like this. And you'll notice that it's 5.5 inches. Oh my God, is this so perfect or what? Oh yes, it is. Because look at that. It's almost like it was planned that way, right? So this was just 8.5 by 11 sheets cut in half. And we're using our cards, which are just a half sheet of paper too. All right, so I lay my ruler down in the middle of this. And I'm going to make 3 marks on this. I'm going to come in 1 inch from the top, right here. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to come 1 inch from the bottom. I'm going to measure that 5.5. So we know 2.5 is 5, is the half of 5, right? It's 5.5. So I'm going to go up 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to come up to 2. I hate using fractions. Let's do it this way. Look, it's 140 millimeters. What's 140 millimeters divided by 2? 70. God, that was so much easier. So 70 millimeters right here. So I've got one that comes down 25 millimeters. 25 millimeters. Essentially what we want is about 1 inch from the bottom and the top, and then 1 in the middle. Then you'll take your awl and you'll push it through all 4 sheets at one time. So I'm just going to give this a good crease again. Right in that fold. Yes? I'm sorry? This one is 1 inch or 25 millimeters. This was 70 millimeters, was the middle, which was roughly whatever that is. So 5 and 2.5, like 2 3/4 inches, somewhere in that neighborhood. 1 inch and 25 millimeters again. So once you have those those spots marked on that, that's where you're going to push your hole through the papers. Right in the fold, just push down until you get all the way through all 4 pages. So I'm just going to circle these so that you can see where those holes were at on this. You'll be able to see the holes through the back of the paper when you flip it over. And then I'm going to choose one of these folds. It doesn't matter to me where you put it for this demo. But it needs to be on an inside fold of your book. So wherever you're looking at, these are the inside folds of the book, not the outside folds where you can see the 3 pages that are being glued together, laminated together. So I'm going to pull this open like that. I'm going to take my top page of that book, of that signature, that I had all my measurements in. I'm going to lay it down right on top of that fold. And then I'm going to use my awl and poke through, right through that same hole. And now I've got those 3 holes in my card. Or I'm sorry, in my accordion book. Take your paper. You can choose any one of those pages that you want, but it has to be on an inside fold. You'll notice that this is an inside fold. See how it's folding on the inside? Outside folds you can see the 3 pieces of paper. So you don't want that one. You want the one that is folded. I just folded my page in half so I could get it lined up perfectly to begin with. So I just laid it down along the edges. I held it tight, rolled it over. 1, 2, 3. You could also measure that. Remember, that's 25 millimeters, 70 millimeters, 25 millimeters.
Do you happen to have paper you haven't cut yet? Because it looks a little.
Oh, dang. No, I don't. I was like so efficient. I'm like, I'm gonna cut so many out that people use those. That'll be fine. But there'll be you'll have that space, a little bit of space at the top and the bottom, but the whole process is the same. It's just that measure out on the paper and then place that paper. You can eyeball the middle of that and then get it put into that spot. Okay, does anyone need me to slow down on that?
Please.
Okay, we'll give you a few more minutes. Okay, so this is folded. It's 25, 70, and then this would be 75, 25, 70, and then this is 25. Yeah. So 25, your centimeters is 2.5.
Oh,
It's one. Great.
No, don't do it. We'll sew this one, so don't glue this.
So then we,
Okay, so come down. So right there, just put that mark right there.
putting this in the middle between all of the little things.
You're on the this is, well, you were able to fold it the other way. So the folds should go okay.
So if you see, because if you're looking at,
Okay.
you don't see the 3 pages.
So yours is different. Yours is different from mine.
Any of it, it just has to be, it has to be, like, if you're looking at it, when you look at the card, it holds, it's got.
So instead of, that's fine. We're going to fold. So this is how I was constructing it, was like this. And then this is like that. But what you did was this.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I think the whole
Cool.
Which is fine.
Okay.
If you were to have, let's say, illustration words, you couldn't then do that because then it comes up. Where, but you could do it like this and then you just
Listen, you gotta respect it.
but because it's a blank
Do you?
page, a blank
Yes.
page.
So when you
Is this one? So, okay, anyone else need my eyes?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you need something underneath this though, then I say here's like for essay. It's a 7 or 50 words. I'm like, yeah, it's 200 words. Yeah, it's like, I think it's because the whole this parent contrast essay. So do this one for 200 words. That's yeah. Yeah, it's just like 200 and 200.
And you don't have to, you're being really gentle with it.
But then it was just, yeah, it was just like
that lined up.
750 words max.
What? I agree with that.
Now, this,
I don't know.
and then,
I was gonna say, just like, I would say if you were like, people would be like, in the focus, people would be like, you must have heard talking. No, I hear you. I don't know what the fuck you're saying.
If you don't have subtitles, there's about
all right, next step here. So we're going to, actually we'll end up sewing this in just a moment. I need to find my, my needle. There it is. Measuring thread when you are doing short books like this is pretty easy. You don't need a lot of thread. In general, my suggestion to you is that you use 3 times the length of the run. So I'm going 1, and then I'm just going to pull that up 2 and 3. If you're doing a book that has a lot of stitching, if you're doing a Coptic stitch, if you're doing decorative stitching along the way, then you would want to use more. So maybe 4 times the amount. But it's hard to work with string when it gets over, when your thread it's hard to sew when it's over 2 feet long, 3 feet long. It can be done, but it takes a lot of time. So you have to weigh your decision making on, do I want it to be seamless but uncomfortable to sew for about the first half of the book until you get your thread into a manageable length, or do you want to use a shorter length and then have to tie it off and then start over again? If your threads are showing, like if the stitching is a decorative component to your book, then you're going to want to do your best to have 1 full length of string and just work through it. If your strings are going to be hidden, then and because you're going to glue a cover onto it, then you don't have to worry about it as much. We're going to do a saddle stitch today, and the saddle stitch is essentially it is one of the foundational kinds of stitches. And essentially, we're going to go start in the middle. We're going to go over from behind. We're going to come through this one. We're going to go back through this one. We're going to go around. We're going to come back through and back on this one. So you're going to see a line, your thread line, solid on the front side and the back side of it. I'm going to be using this red thread just so that you can kind of visualize what is happening here. We're going to start with the thread on the inside of the book. You'll notice that I'm also using a curved needle. That is definitely not necessary. I have grown used to using the curved needles for everything. So if you have a straight needle, that is fine, and it'll work perfect for this. There's not a lot of movement. But we're going to start in the middle hole. I'm sorry? You have all 4 of your pages together. This is an entire signature. We're going to stitch all 4 at the same time. Thank you. So you put the needle through all 4, pull it through, and then go through that middle one. In your accordion book, pull it all the way through.
Are we tying it off?
Don't tie it off. You pull this thread all the way through until you've got a few inches out here, 2 to 3 inches on the inside of the book. And then I'm just going to flip my book over so you can see the back side of it. So there's the back side. I'm just going to, this is the top. Well, it's just going to the next hole. It doesn't really matter which hole you go through next. Poke it through the hole. Bring it through the signature. And make sure that you are going through the holes that you punched. That you're not poking an extra hole with your needle into your pages. Oops, and I bent a page. Fold that back down. And pull that through. When you pull this, hold on to that middle one so you don't pull that thread all the way through your book and pull it out. So I'm just going to pull on that, just make sure that it's tight. Go back through the middle hole. Now, when you push your needle through this one, there's already a thread there. So pull your thread up and out of the way. And it is always preferable to avoid sending your needle through the thread. This is waxed thread, and if you put your needle through the thread, it ends up fraying the thread and makes it weaker, gives it a spot where it can break. And then also when you're pulling your needle through, and pulling it tight, it may pull part of that thread through and then it's just going to look like a mess. So you want to make sure that when you push your needles through holes that already have threads in them, that you take care not to push the needle through your thread. Go through that last hole. At this point, you'll likely not have to worry about this thread holding on to it. You can pull this tight, and you'll notice that any slack that was in there from you flipping it over, that disappears. Now, for those of you who are to this point, I'll talk about how to tie this off first of all, and then and we'll get this taken care of, and then I can come back around and talk to everyone else. Let's see. So first of all, you'll take your open ends. You'll wrap the short end around the needle threaded part and pull that. So you've got these, it's just like the beginning of a shoelace tie. I'm going to pull this back up so that knot falls right into the middle of that hole. Tie it around one more time. And if you're using waxed thread, this is all you'll need to do. You just pull this tight. That wax thread, the wax part helps to hold that knot together. Then you'll take your needle, because you still have your needle on the thread. You'll push that back through that hole. Try not to go through any of your threads. You're going to pull on that until you feel or see that knot come right back into, like deep into the signature, into the holes. That will help hide it. So I'm giving it a pretty good pull right here. We'll pull it into that space. And then after that, then you can clip it. Where are my scissors? Here we go. Clip it. Give yourself about an inch or so on that clip. If you had more showing. And then you can just put that right underneath. And then the back, you can cut down low. If you had So one of the things that I use with my wax thread is I actually have something called a thread zapper, and it's just this little heating iron, a little tiny one, and you press a button, it gets really hot, and then I touch it to the wax thread. It melts the wax, and then everything gets melted together. But for right now, like the only reason I would do that is just to kind of keep these frays down. But it's going to hold that page just fine on its own without that. Something that you could add to it. Now, you fold your book back up. You open your book. You're reading your book. Oh, and then all of a sudden you get to this spot where there is a signature in here. And then you continue on to the end of the book.
So these go in the middle first, and then like I
3 times the length of your book.
you weren't.
So it's just like, oh my God.